A lot of religious people believe atheists have a moral problem. No God means no rules, no scripture means no foundation, no heaven, no hell, no reason to be good. And honestly, from the outside, that sounds logical. Because if morality doesn't come from God, then where exactly does it come from? But here's the strange part. Some of the kindest people you'll ever meet are atheists. And some deeply religious people have done things that still make history books sweat nervously in the corner. So maybe the real question isn't, can atheists be moral? Maybe the real question is, why do so many people assume morality needs religion in the first place? And once you see the answer, you start noticing something uncomfortable about how humans actually think about ethics. The hidden assumption nobody notices. Most religious arguments about atheism begin with a hidden assumption that almost nobody stops to examine carefully. The assumption is that morality is something humans receive from above, not something humans slowly develop through experience, empathy, suffering, and social life. In this view, morality arrives already completed, like a divine instruction manual handed down from the sky. Follow the rules, avoid punishment, collect eternal rewards. Simple, clean, organized. Humanity does seem to love turning existence into customer service policies. But think about what that idea actually implies. If a person only avoids harming others because they fear divine punishment, is that truly morality? Or is it obedience mixed with fear? That question makes many people uncomfortable because it touches something deeper than religion itself. It challenges how humans understand goodness. After all, most people do not want to believe their compassion is just fear wearing a polite outfit. And here is where things become difficult to ignore. Deep down, most humans already know certain things feel wrong long before religion explains them. You do not need scripture to feel disturbed by cruelty. You do not need a sacred text to feel pain when somebody betrays you. You do not need divine revelation to comfort a frightened child. Those reactions appear naturally inside ordinary human experience. Even very young children display empathy before they understand theology. Studies show toddlers often try to help strangers without being taught religious doctrine first. A small child sees another child crying and instinctively wants to comfort them. No sermon required. No ancient language involved. Just raw human instinct operating on its own. That creates a serious philosophical problem for the claim that morality only comes from God. If moral instincts appear before religious understanding, then morality may be rooted deeper inside human nature than many people assume. Philosophers have wrestled with this for centuries, because it changes the entire conversation. Suddenly, morality no longer looks like a list of commands descending from heaven. It starts looking like something humans discovered together while learning how to survive each other. And honestly, considering human history, surviving each other may be humanity's greatest miracle. The ancient Greek problem that still haunts religion. Long before modern atheism existed, an old Greek philosopher asked a question so dangerous that people are still arguing about it over 2,000 years later. His name was Socrates, which, historically speaking, was usually a sign that somebody powerful was about to become deeply annoyed. The question itself sounds simple at first, almost harmless, the kind of thing that slips quietly into your brain and then refuses to leave for the next 20 years. Socrates asked, "Is something good because God commands it, or does God command it because it is good?" That may sound like the sort of sentence philosophy professors whisper lovingly to their coffee mugs at midnight, but this question cracks the entire foundation of the debate wide open, because if something is good only because God says so, then morality becomes completely dependent on authority. Goodness would not have any independent meaning. It would simply mean obedience. If tomorrow God declared cruelty virtuous, then cruelty would technically become good by definition. Most believers instinctively reject that idea immediately. And honestly, that reaction is important, because it reveals something fascinating. Deep down, most people already believe some actions are inherently wrong, regardless of authority, even divine authority. But now the problem flips in the other direction. If God commands kindness because kindness is already good, then goodness exists independently from God's commands. Religion would not create morality in that case. It would describe morality, maybe guide it, maybe interpret it, but not invent it from nothing. That changes the conversation entirely. Suddenly, morality becomes something humans can reason about together. Something people can debate, refine, improve, and challenge collectively. Not just a list of instructions carved permanently into stone. Human beings become active participants in ethical understanding, rather than passive receivers of divine orders. And history actually supports this more than many people realize. Moral progress rarely arrived all at once through revelation. It usually emerged slowly through painful human experience. through argument, through empathy expanding outward, through societies realizing that certain forms of suffering were unnecessary and cruel. People once accepted slavery as normal. Public torture was entertainment in some civilizations. Executions were community events. Humanity has spent a shocking amount of history treating horror like a weekend activity, yet over time moral standards changed. Not instantly, not perfectly, but gradually. Which raises a deeply uncomfortable historical question. If morality only comes from religion, why did humanity's moral understanding continue evolving long after the scriptures themselves were written? Religion often followed moral progress instead of leading it. This is usually the point where conversations become uncomfortable. Not because people are evil. Most religious people are sincere, decent human beings, trying to make sense of life the best they can. The tension comes from something more personal. Many people grow up believing religion created morality itself, that without religion, humanity would collapse into chaos, like raccoons fighting over expired yogurt in a parking lot. But history tells a far more complicated story. For centuries, slavery existed openly inside deeply religious societies, not hidden, not condemned universally, accepted, defended, sometimes even justified through scripture. The same was true for torture, public executions, forced marriages, and treating women as legal property rather than equal human beings. And this is not aimed at one religion alone. Humans have managed to behave terribly under almost every ideology imaginable: religious, political, tribal, nationalist. Give humanity enough confidence and a flag, and things tend to come to alarming very quickly. But here is the important question people rarely stop to ask. What eventually challenged many of these practices? Usually not sudden revelation descending from heaven. Usually not a brand new commandment appearing dramatically in the clouds while somebody fainted nearby. More often, moral change happened because empathy expanded outward. Humans slowly started recognizing the suffering of people they previously ignored. Somebody eventually asked, what if slaves feel pain exactly like we do? Another person asked, what if women are fully human in the same way men are? Those questions sound obvious today, but at one point in history they threatened entire social systems. That shift matters enormously, because it suggests moral progress often emerged through growing human compassion, rather than simple obedience to ancient authority. Sometimes religious reformers participated in that progress. Other times institutions resisted it fiercely. Both happen throughout history, and pretending otherwise helps nobody. Now, atheists are not usually arguing that religious people cannot be moral. Most atheists know deeply religious individuals who are generous, compassionate, and genuinely admirable. The argument is different from that. What many atheists are really saying is that morality may come from something deeper than doctrine itself. Something rooted directly inside human consciousness. Inside empathy, emotional awareness, social cooperation, and the ability to recognize suffering in others. And strangely enough, modern neuroscience may support that idea more than either side expected. Your brain was building morality before your beliefs. Humans are social creatures long before they are religious creatures. That part is easy to forget because modern life hides how dependent we really are on each other. We like to imagine ourselves as rugged, independent individuals, making purely rational decisions. But take away society for 3 days, and most of us cannot even remember how to open a can without searching the internet first. For most of human history, survival depended on cooperation. Tribes that learned trust, fairness, and social bonding survived more effectively than groups consumed by endless internal violence. A community where everyone constantly stole from each other did not build civilizations. It barely survived winter. So over thousands of years, evolution rewarded certain traits that helped groups function together. Empathy, reciprocity, loyalty, guilt, fairness, trust. These were not random emotional decorations added for entertainment. They became survival advantages. And now science can actually observe parts of this process happening inside the brain itself. Humans naturally react to unfairness at an emotional level. People experience distress when witnessing suffering. Certain neural systems activate when we observe pain in others, almost as if the brain partially mirrors another person's experience internally. Even infants show signs of preferring helpful behavior over harmful behavior before they can fully speak. That is astonishing when you really think about it. Your nervous system is already participating in moral awareness before theology ever begins explaining morality conceptually. In many ways, religion may have organized moral instincts that already existed inside human social nature. Now this is the moment some religious viewers become nervous, because they hear this and immediately think, so humans are just biological machines pretending to be meaningful? Not exactly. Explaining where morality develops is not the same as destroying morality. Understanding how eyesight evolved does not make sunsets less beautiful. Understanding the biology behind love does not make grief less painful. And understanding empathy neurologically does not make compassion fake. If anything, it makes morality even more extraordinary. Tiny conscious organisms drifting through space on a small rock somehow develop the ability to care deeply about strangers, sacrifice for family, protect vulnerable people, and feel emotional pain over injustice. The universe produced creatures capable of kindness. That is remarkable whether someone believes in God or not. But despite all this, atheists still hear one accusation more than any other. And honestly, it reveals the biggest misunderstanding in this entire debate. Without God, why not just do evil? This question appears constantly in conversations about atheism. Sometimes it comes from genuine curiosity, sometimes from fear, and occasionally, with the emotional intensity of a grandmother protecting her secret at crassroll recipe, like it contains nuclear launch codes. But listen very carefully to what the question accidentally reveals. When somebody asks, "Without God, what stops you from murdering people?" An atheist often hears something very different underneath it. They hear, "You need supernatural surveillance in order to behave morally?" That is a deeply unsettling implication. Because most non-religious people are not walking around resisting violent urges, only because they fear punishment after death. They avoid harming others because they understand suffering is real, pain is real, fear is real, loss is real. Human beings matter to them emotionally, not just cosmically. That distinction changes everything. One form of morality is externally enforced through reward and punishment. The other is internally understood through empathy and emotional awareness. One says, "I should not do evil because I might be punished." The other says, "I should not do evil because another conscious being can suffer exactly like I can." Those are not psychologically identical systems. Now obviously laws matter, social consequences matter, civilization matters. Human beings are complicated little creatures with fragile egos, internet addictions, and suspiciously strong opinions about lawn maintenance. Society absolutely needs rules. But the deepest forms of morality usually emerge from emotional recognition, rather than fear alone. People become genuinely ethical when they emotionally understand the humanity of others, not merely when they obey authority under threat. And here is the strange part many believers do not notice. Most religious people already operate this way themselves. Think about how people treat loved ones. A father does not comfort his grieving daughter because a verse instructed him to complete task number 14 under family obligations. Husband does not tie his stare caring for a sick wife because he fears celestial punishment if he falls asleep early. People help those they love because they genuinely care about their suffering. The emotional instinct comes first. Theology often arrives afterward to explain or reinforce it, which means many religious people may already rely on deeply human moral instincts far more than they realize. Their compassion is not fake. Their kindness is not mechanical obedience. It is authentic emotional connection. And once you recognize that, a difficult realization begins to appear quietly in the background. Maybe belief does not create morality as completely as many people assume. Maybe belief mainly shapes, organizes, and explains moral instincts that were already there waiting underneath. Many religious people already use human judgment above Scripture. Most believers do not follow Scripture literally. And honestly, civilization should probably send a thank you card for that. Because if every ancient command were applied exactly as written, modern society would become very strange very quickly. HR departments would collapse before lunch. People interpret Scripture. They soften harsh passages. They ignore rules that no longer fit modern life. They emphasize love, mercy, forgiveness, and compassion over strict obedience. And many do this sincerely. They are not trying to cheat their own religion. They are trying to make sense of ancient texts through the moral awareness they already carry. But why does that happen? Because humans already possess moral intuitions they often trust more deeply than ancient commands. That is the part people rarely say out loud. When a sacred text appears to endorse cruelty, most modern believers do not usually accept the cruelty as good. They reinterpret the passage. They call it historical context. They say it belonged to another time. They search for a deeper meaning that feels more compassionate. And notice what is happening there. Modern human morality is being used as the filter, not the other way around. That is huge. A believer reads a difficult passage and quietly decides, this part reflects love, this part reflects culture, this part reflects history, this part no longer feels morally acceptable. That decision may feel religious from the inside, but psychologically it also depends on human judgment. In practice, Many believers are not simply receiving morality. They are actively constructing it. They weigh passages against conscience. They measure doctrine against compassion. They adjust interpretation when human suffering becomes impossible to ignore. And that does not make them dishonest. It may actually make them better. A person who refuses to defend cruelty just because it appears in an ancient source is not morally weak. They are morally awake. This is where the atheist argument becomes sharper. The difference between many atheists and many religious people may not be morality itself. Both may value kindness, honesty, fairness, and protection of the vulnerable. The difference may be where they believe those values ultimately come from. The religious person may say, God placed this morality in me. The atheist may say, human beings developed it through empathy, reason, and shared suffering. But in everyday life, both may be using the same inner tool, conscience. And underneath all of this sits an emotional truth that people rarely admit openly. The fear beneath the argument. For many believers, the idea that morality could exist without God feels genuinely terrifying. Not because they are foolish, not because they secretly want permission to behave badly, and not because they lack compassion. The fear runs much deeper than that. It threatens structure itself. If morality ultimately comes from human beings, then humans carry the responsibility for shaping it. There is no cosmic parent stepping in to guarantee fairness. No universal referee making sure justice always wins in the end. No final courtroom where every unanswered wrong is perfectly corrected. That is emotionally heavy for most people to sit with, especially because reality often feels painfully unfair. Terrible people sometimes succeed. Corrupt people gain power. Kind people suffer quietly. Innocent people die young while cruel people live long enough to start giving motivational speeches online. Religion often offers emotional certainty in the middle of that chaos. It tells people there is meaning behind suffering, justice behind confusion, order behind randomness. Even when life appears unfair, believers can trust that some larger moral structure still exists beyond human vision. Atheism usually offers something far less comforting: responsibility without certainty. And honestly, that can feel frightening. Because if humans are responsible for morality, then humans cannot simply wait for divine correction. We become accountable for the kind of world we create together: wars, inequality, cruelty, exploitation, corruption. Those problems are no longer explained away as part of some mysterious cosmic plan. They become human failures requiring human action. But here's the irony many religious critics misunderstand. Most atheists do not see morality becoming meaningless without God. In many cases, they see morality becoming even more meaningful. Because kindness becomes a conscious choice rather than obedience under surveillance. Compassion becomes intentional. Ethical behavior becomes something humans actively build together, despite uncertainty, suffering, and disagreement. No guaranteed reward waiting afterward. No divine backup plan arriving to clean up the mess. Just us. First, that sounds bleak, cold even, like humanity has been abandoned in a silent universe with nothing but anxiety and tax forms. But then something extraordinary starts to emerge from that silence. If human beings are capable of love, sacrifice, empathy, forgiveness, and moral courage without cosmic force compelling them, then those actions may carry even deeper meaning than people realize. Goodness becomes something fragile, conscious creatures created together against the odds. And maybe that is what makes it beautiful. Maybe morality was never at its strongest when humans obeyed blindly. Maybe true morality begins when people consciously choose empathy even when certainty is impossible. Not because they expect eternal reward waiting beyond death, not because they fear punishment from above, but because they recognize something deeply fragile and deeply valuable inside other conscious human beings. And if that is true, then atheists are not rejecting morality itself. They are rejecting the claim that morality only matters when enforced by divine authority. They are questioning whether goodness loses meaning the moment nobody is supervising it. Because think about what real compassion actually is. A person helps a stranger they will never meet again. Someone sacrifices for family knowing there may be no cosmic reward afterward. Humans choose kindness in a universe that often gives no guarantees at all. That may not weaken morality. It may actually reveal its purest form. Which means the real debate was never whether atheists can be good. It is whether goodness still matters when nobody is watching.